This was something new to us. A bombing in broad daylight in a resort country club. It was shocking.
A violent explosion.
He suffered a traumatic injury from the shrapnel and the shock wave. His death was instantaneous.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
Emotions flare. She has a temper. She's mad at Gary, and it's alleged that she might have a weapon.
Gary had lots of enemies. There were millions of dollars owed to different people.
He said, I'm going to kill Gary Triano because he ripped me off.
He may have had dealings with the mob, and he ends up killed in a car bombing. Those two things could go together.
The truth will be revealed.
This is like the dogs in the chase. It's a trail that we can't not follow.
That was the smoking gun to show that they had committed this murder.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. In the Arizona desert lies the city of Tucson, a pleasure seeker's oasis, blessed with beautiful landscapes and year-long sunshine.
Tucson does have its upper-class areas that are designed around recreation and relaxation, the country clubs, the plush golf courses. Years ago, real estate was booming. They were building resort destinations. You had celebrities coming here just to vacation because they wanted to stay at those kind of places. That type of luxury lifestyle was really growing in Tucson.
But on November 1st, 1996, the upscale world of the city's rich and famous is brutally shattered.
911, what are you reporting?
There's a car explosion in the parking lot.
Is it on fire?
Yes, it is.
911, what is the emergency?
La Paloma Country Club. Bomb just blew up in a car.
We have an explosion in the country club parking lot.
Okay, that's a vehicle?
I'm not sure there's a fire and we need paramedics.
The 911 calls came in about 5:40 p.m.
There'd been an explosion. There was one person deceased. I could see even before I walked up that the car was completely destroyed.
The roof has been torn off of it. All the doors were blown open from the shockwave. The glass obviously is shattered out of the vehicle. The windshield had flown south over 100, 150 feet and had landed in the swimming pool of the country club.
It was something we hadn't seen before. Tucson, like any community, has some awful murders that go on, but we'd never seen a bombing in broad daylight, a resort country club. This was something new to us. It was shocking.
The victim is local business tycoon, 52-year-old Gary Triano.
Gary Triano, he started out as just a working businessman trying to make a living, and he went from that to being a multimillionaire land developer.
Gary was really kind of an amazing person. He was a high flyer in the sense of he had this ability to raise large amounts of money for different investment ventures.
He had 5 children, 2 from his first marriage, 2 from his second marriage, and then he also had a 5th child with his ex-girlfriend, Robin. Gary Triano was larger than life. He was so charismatic. I knew him personally, and always a gentleman, and always the life of the party.
Tasked with investigating the murder of Gary Triano are detectives James Gamber and Keith St. John. They start by surveying the crime scene looking for evidence.
Mr. Triano was still very intact. He suffered a lot of blast injury to his right hand, his right arm, and to the right side of his face. So a lot of it was thermal injury, where it's burning from the heat of the explosion. And then there was a lot of traumatic injury from the shrapnel and the shock waves. His death was instantaneous. We relied on our bomb technicians to tell us where the explosion took place. They pointed to the right front passenger seat, said the device was sitting right here. It was very easy to determine from his injuries that he had been essentially leaning over towards the front passenger seat and had been picking something up when the device detonated. The bomb techs also discovered some burnt material, and it was from a gym bag.
Detectives determined the killer likely put the bomb in the gym bag and then placed it on the front seat of Gary's vehicle.
The bomb techs amazed me again because they actually recovered the radio crystal from the remote control device. And they find parts of the servo in the blast scene, so now we know it's a remotely detonated device.
We learned that the radio waves had to be line of sight. That gave us the best clue that the killer was in the parking lot when the device went off.
This was someone sitting there watching, and then they pushed a button and made it go off.
The mindset of somebody that could sit there and just calmly switch a button on a remote control and blow him up, that's pretty perverse. It's devoid of any sort of human feeling when you can just calmly switch a button and snuff out another human life.
That a person would sit and wait for the precise time to set the explosion off indicated it was somebody that was stalking, someone that had planned the murder. It just wasn't random.
Time of death in a lot of homicide investigations is a real open question.
In this case, the explosion was so powerful that it stopped Gary Triano's watch at the precise time of the explosion.
It stopped at exactly 5:38 p.m.
To catch the killer, detectives will need to unravel the last 24 hours of Gary Triano's life.
Gary had been golfing with a friend that afternoon, and they golfed 2:30 to 4:30ish. And after they'd gotten some drinks, a bite to eat in the country club, his golf partner had indicated that it was right around 5:30 that the two of them walked to the parking lot. They chatted, and the golf partner then walked away from Gary's car. And it was just shortly after that that the explosion occurred.
As investigators interview the employees of the country club, they learn something unsettling.
4:15, someone had called the clubhouse asking about Gary Triano.
And the caller's not identified, so this unidentified person says, "Is he playing golf today?" And the pro shop says, "Yes."
And, given the fact that a little over an hour later, he's in the parking lot and the car explodes, clearly we wanted to know who was making that phone call.
Could it have been the killer? Absolutely.
That's something we have to look into. But we couldn't trace the phone call back to its source. After all the different interviews, I didn't see that we had any concrete evidence that anybody saw the killer in the parking lot that night. So we knew we were in for hard work.
Looking for information that could point them in the direction of the killer, detectives speak with Gary's girlfriend, Donna.
Gary's current girlfriend, Donna, was at the scene when I got there and I interviewed her. And obviously she is upset. This is a horrifying incident. Donna and his family members, they want to know what happened, who did this, and I don't have any answers.
Donna tells detectives that while Gary was an optimistic man, the downturn in the economy hit him hard.
From 92 to 93, Gary Triano went from $1.7 million to $107,000. A 93% loss in his income.
He wasn't able to meet his financial obligations. I mean, at the country club, he was behind on his dues, but he always had that belief the next deal is going to work.
But given the amount of debt that he had accumulated in his recent past, that plus the added pressure of who Gary Triano was and his status in the community, there was a lot of stress during that time for Gary.
Gary's financial downfall started to wear on him.
Gary had become a little bit paranoid. He thought he was being followed. And so he became a little wary.
It was some tough times there. I was told by a friend of Gary Triano's that a couple of months prior to the murder that he had told her that he knew somebody was following him, and it was real evident. And he was scared. He didn't know why.
But Donna says she has a good idea who this stalker is.
She told law enforcement, hey, you might want to be looking at the former girlfriend because there was some animosity there.
Robin is a young lady who was the ex-girlfriend. We learned that she had a baby with Gary. The baby wasn't very old at the time of the murder.
Robin reportedly was angry because she had Gary's child. There was no wedding in the future. Donna was able to provide us with a recording of a phone message that was left for Gary. And it has Robin saying, "You're going to pay. Someday you're going to pay."
With suspicion swirling around Gary's ex-girlfriend Robin, detectives dig deeper and learn that a year before the murder, police responded to a domestic violence call at their home.
There's an incident between the two of them where she throws a vase at Gary, and it's alleged that she might have a weapon. In any murder investigation, you obviously look at people that are close to the victim. Who was mad at him? Who was angered by him? So when you look at Robin, she has a temper. She's mad at Gary. And after the birth of the child, emotions flare. Jealousy, anger. And this anger carried over into murder.
Believing Gary Triano's former girlfriend Robin may have wanted to kill him, detectives track her down at her home. They confront Robin about her angry encounters with Gary.
She says it wasn't a happy separation. There were some angry phone calls, and there was maybe plates broken and things like that.
There was animosity when she first became pregnant. However, after paternity was decided, and Gary knew that he was the father, their relationship had gotten better.
Robin tells detectives that she has moved on since Gary and is now married.
I spoke to her current husband, who says, yeah, she has a temper. But her grudges didn't last long. When she's mad, it's going to happen right here, right now, and it's going to be over right here and right now.
Detectives ask Robin about her activities on the day Gary was killed. They learn she was home taking care of her child.
Robin's point of view is he's a guy who has always made a comeback. And he is a good father to the child. So she has no benefit in eliminating him. Any future income that might come from him would be gone.
And when detectives look into Robin's alibi on the day of the murder, it checks out, and she's eliminated as a suspect.
So the evidence doesn't take us to Robin, and her personal history doesn't support her being involved in a long-term plot to kill Gary.
Searching for new leads, detectives look deeper into Gary's personal life and turn their focus to another ex, his former wife, Pam Phillips. They track Pam down at her home in Aspen, Colorado.
Pam was very attractive. She knew how to socialize. She was an up-and-comer financially. She was working in the commercial real estate market.
Pam tells detectives she met Gary when he was married, but they fell madly in love. Gary divorced his wife and married Pam in 1986, less than a year after they first met.
They got married in San Diego on a boat. I believe Donald Trump was at the wedding, and people like major actors. So that it was, champagne flowing, spare no expense type of relationship.
It's been reported that the wedding ring that Pamela got from Gary was valued at $250,000, $250,000.
tells detectives they were very happy. They went on to have 2 children together. But 8 years later, when Gary lost their money, he changed. His moods were up and down, and their relationship suffered.
In 1994, after Gary Triano lost his money, his marriage collapsed as well. There was a lot of tension there, and it was a very contentious divorce.
Pam talked about bringing $2 million of her own money into the relationship when they got married, and she found out that that was gone.
There were a lot of fights about custody issues with respect to who was going to get the children, Gary's financial responsibility.
So, Pam Phillips moves to Aspen and takes the children with her to start her new life.
But when you have that kind of acrimonious divorce between Gary and Pam Phillips, it's something that makes you a little concerned about Pam's potential involvement. But, nothing is making sense yet.
Detectives asked Pam about her whereabouts on the day Gary was violently killed.
Pam told us that she was in Aspen that Friday night. And we talked to people that were with her. So we were comfortable that she was in Aspen at the time of the murder.
Having ruled out Pam as a suspect, detectives turned back to the crime scene, looking for new leads.
The ATF was reconstructing the bomb from the parts gathered out of the parking lot. And there were a couple things that were interesting about the bomb reconstruction.
The battery supplies were way more energy than it really needed to detonate the device.
That was an indication that perhaps the person was not familiar with making bombs. They were a novice at making bombs. The nature of the bomb itself, 18-inch pipe bombs stuffed with a pound of gunpowder rigged up to this remote control, was not sophisticated, and it was really more indicative of someone that may have learned this from people that were making bombs in the 70s or the 80s. And gave an indication that maybe this was an older individual.
Armed with new information about the killer, detectives take another look at Gary Triano's close friends and associates.
Detectives are looking into various financial motives. Gary had lots of business partners, and he had enemies. Former business partners were suing him. There were millions of dollars, at least alleged, that Gary owed to different people. Could one of them have been responsible for Gary's death? Are any of these people saying, I'm giving up on ever getting my money back, so I'm going to exact some sort of retribution and kill Gary Triano?
Believing real estate mogul Gary Triano could have been murdered by someone he owed money to, detectives shift their focus to his business associates.
People talked about a man by the name of Neil McNeese. McNeese hated Gary Triano.
McNeese is an actual billionaire who lived here in Tucson. His family had some uranium mines in northern Arizona, and they made a lot of money. Gary had borrowed some money from this guy McNeese. He'd borrowed $80,000, and as collateral, Gary had given McNeese what he claimed to be a $250,000 diamond ring that belonged to the ex-wife, Pam. But according to McNeese, the diamond was fake. It was a cubic zirconium. It was worth, at best, a few $1,000s. Could McNeese have been responsible for the murder because of the $80,000 that Gary hadn't paid him back?
But it turns out the information is a dead end.
McNeese was suspicious, but that doesn't really get you anywhere because there was no evidence at that point in time McNeese had anything to do with the murder at all.
Having exhausted yet another lead, the investigation into Gary Triano's murder stalls.
As an investigator, you want to do the best you can for both the case and especially the family who's just lost a loved one. They're looking to you for answers. And then when you add Gary Triano was well known in the community, there was a lot of stress during that time. The difficult part of this case was just the sheer number of potential suspects that had to be looked at, the number of leads that had to be gone through and basically triage. You had to look at them and say, well, is this something that really could fit? Not only could it fit, but is there evidence to back up the theory? No, so you moved on to the next one.
Searching for new leads, detectives dig deeper into Gary Triano's business connections, looking for someone angry enough to want to kill him in such a ruthless way.
Gary was really good at getting people to invest money in his projects. Some of the people weren't the kind of people that most of us would seek money from. I mean, there were mobsters back on the East Coast that Gary was indebted to. And so our thought was this mob related? Because you just don't see people getting killed in car bombings in Tucson.
Detectives learn one of the people Gary Triano owes money to is Gary Fears, a gangster from Florida.
Gary Triano was marketing building a casino on a small island that belonged to the Republic of China. And Gary purported that he had permission from the Chinese government to run a casino there.
Gary Fears fronted a lot of money toward that endeavor. But the endeavor fell through. China wasn't going to allow the gaming.
A lot of people felt that Gary had misrepresented the approval from the People's Republic of China. They only had local officials' approval to do this. Gary Fears is angry. He lost tens of thousands of dollars in total.
He was somebody that had to be looked at. He was not the nicest guy.
Word on the street, what people told us is that Gary Fears had a shady background, and he was someone to be feared. Someone that you should, you put yourself at risk if you crossed him.
Believing Gary Triano may have been killed as retribution for double-crossing Fears, investigators track him down.
Gary Fears was of interest to us, and you have to evaluate the person. Were they capable of it? Did they have the means, motive, and opportunity?
When police question Fears, he admits that he was furious with Gary Triano about being misled over the China deal.
He says, yeah, I lost tens of thousands of dollars. But Gary Fears was suing Gary Triano to get money back from him. And Gary dissolved all his debts by declaring bankruptcy. It's almost an automatic reflex when your business ventures overwhelm your capital is file bankruptcy and absolve your debt. Gary Fears was greatly frustrated by Gary's financial dealing. Maybe his anger over the money, the financial loss, overrode his common sense.
After a business deal gone bad, police believe mobster Gary Fears may have something to do with the brutal killing of Gary Triano. They ask him point blank if he's responsible for Triano's death.
He goes, very stone cold and absolute, looked at us and said, I'm not going to kill somebody for several $1,000s.
The mob complicates an investigation because it's a tight-knit group that doesn't make mistakes easily. And also they are going to have no problem lying when it comes to police investigations.
Doubtful Fears is being honest with them. Detectives ask him to take a polygraph test.
Mr. Fears agreed to be polygraphed and was asked, again, point blank in the polygraph, did you kill Gary Triano? Did you cause Gary Triano's death? Mr. Fears passed the polygraph. In addition to the polygraph, Gary Fears provides the alibi that he was at a family wedding and there's, credible witnesses who could place him at the wedding at the time of the murder.
We talked to as many people as we could. We found no direct link between Gary Fears and the bombing.
9 years pass, and just when it looks like the case will never be solved, detectives get a surprising new lead from police in Aspen, Colorado.
The explosion here in Tucson made national news, and so I received a call from Detective Crowley in Aspen. He talked about his fraud investigation where a person by the name of Ron Young was a suspect. And according to Detective Crowley, he had a connection with Pam Phillips, Gary's ex-wife.
Ron Young apparently had scammed several people in Aspen. Pam was one of the victims.
Detective Jim Crowley says there's something really odd here. Pam Phillips was alleging that Ron defrauded her for tens of thousands of dollars. And she was very vocal about it within the community. But when we as law enforcement approach her and say, hey, we need to include you in our case, along with these other fraud victims, she just never makes herself available. It's almost as if she's distancing herself from law enforcement. It was interesting.
Detective Crowley outlines Ron Young's scam for the investigators.
Ron Young would befriend people and profess he was a professional, somebody who knew finances for small businesses. And he would become involved in that business and then take money from the business.
He's defrauding people under the guise of, you'll end up with more money in the bank, you let me handle your financial matters. And he convinced people to let him do it. And the whole time he's skimming your money, he's taking and putting it in his pocket.
When Aspen police go to arrest Ron for fraud, they discover he has fled the state. They track down his van in California. Ron is nowhere to be found, but what they find in the van turns the investigation on its head.
Jim Crowley looks at Ron Young's van and finds Gary Triano's divorce paperwork. There's a list of people who would know Gary Triano, and there's also a map of Tucson.
What they find next raises detectives' suspicions to the next level.
We find a receipt for a local hotel that puts Ron Young in a hotel that's essentially halfway between where Gary Triano's living and the La Paloma Country Club, where he was killed. He's there for about 18 days in the month of July 1996. So does that coincide with when Gary felt like he was being followed? We are exploring every possibility.
Certainly, we're starting to think, did Ron Young have something to do with Gary Triano's death? Was there some sort of relationship beyond this fraudulent activity between Pam Phillips and Ron Young?
Detectives Gamber and St. John take another look at Pam Phillips and find something that raises a red flag.
Even though the divorce had been finalized for quite some time, Pam continued to carry a $2 million life insurance policy on Gary's life. That catches your eye.
The life insurance policy pays the money to Gary and Pam's two children. Since the children are below the age of 18, the $2 million goes directly to Pam.
So in January of 1997, Pam Phillips gets $2.1 million because of Gary's death.
But it's what detectives learn next that puts the spotlight directly on Pam.
Up till that point in time, Pam had been living in a duplex. Within a few months of getting the money, Pam has moved from that duplex into what I can only describe as a beautiful, beautiful home that she has now purchased with the proceeds from the life insurance policy. That raised some concerns with investigators because the children were the primary beneficiaries, and now this money is being used to buy this really lavish home.
So when you follow the money, Pam has a $2 million reason for Gary to die.
Believing Pam Phillips and Ron Young may have conspired to kill Gary Triano, investigators pay another visit to Pam in Aspen.
When they ask her about Ron Young, there's an audible gulp. Where did that come from kind of reaction from her? Which immediately caught our attention.
She maintained that she had hired him to help her business. That's all it was. She claimed that although she didn't want to prosecute, that, he had taken some money from her, and she didn't know where he was.
People lie to the police all the time, and a lot of times it's good to have those lies, because if you can prove a lie, that's even more important than a confession. I felt Pam was definitely minimizing her relationship with Ron Young.
Investigators speak to Pam's circle of friends, hoping to uncover the truth about her relationship with Ron.
The nanny that worked for Pam in Aspen, he describes a very intimate, ongoing relationship.
Ron Young would come over for dinner. There'd be candlelight, there'd be wine, and the two of them would disappear to the upstairs bedroom for the night.
So their relationship goes well beyond the scope of what she had described to us.
There's a growing concern about what Pam and Ron Young did. Could they have been responsible for Gary's death? Could one of them have been the bomber? We're pretty sure it's not Pam because, she has an alibi. She was in Aspen at the time. But could Pam have hired Ron Young or got him in some way to commit the murder?
This is like the dogs in the chase. It's a trail that we can't just not follow.
Working the theory that Gary Triano's ex-wife, Pam Phillips, could be the mastermind behind his brutal murder in 1996, detectives focus on finding her missing accomplice, Ron Young.
We're thinking if we could get Ron Young, we might be able to fill in a lot of the blanks that are here, because something is really fishy about what's going on.
There's an arrest warrant for Ron Young, but no one can find him. This guy is gone. He is off the face of the earth.
Detectives turn to a different strategy, hoping to get a lead.
We go to America's Most Wanted and say, would you feature this guy? We want to find him. We have the fraud case, and we have the fact that we think he's directly involved in a homicide in Tucson. So America's Most Wanted ultimately does the TV show, and they feature Ron Young.
Detectives soon get their big break from a caller in Florida.
A caller says, I'm Ron Young's chiropractor. I know him as Kelly Young, but that's definitely the same guy. And he says, he has an appointment with me tomorrow.
Because of this TV show, we know where Ron Young is, we know where to find him, we know where he's going to be at 10 o'clock the next morning. This is a huge break in the case. The Broward County Sheriff's Department sends their fugitive team out to the chiropractors, and sure enough, right on time at the appointment, here comes Ron Young, and he's taken into custody.
Ron Young is arrested on fraud charges, then flown to Arizona to be interrogated by Tucson police.
Ron Young is a con man. He's confident, he's relaxed, he's amiable, he'll talk to you about everything and anything, but he won't ever answer a direct question.
With Ron in their crosshairs, investigators press him for answers.
What's your relationship with Pam Phillips? Do you know Gary Triano? For hours, we sat there and talked to him. He says he knows nothing about Gary's insurance policy. He has never been to Tucson. Just hours and hours of long, roundabout denials.
But while Ron Young doesn't give up any information, his belongings do.
ATF agents search his hotel room, his apartment, and his storage locker. There's a box of stuff. In that box are about 15 microcassettes.
It was a mother load of information. There were years and years of correspondence between Pam Phillips and Ron Young. And although they don't get specific, that I went out and killed Gary Triano for you, he says things that are more sort of shaded. Like, I did something for you that nobody else would have done in the world. I took care of the problem that you were having.
you sent my money yet? My principal.
I am not going to keep sending you more and more money unless I know that you honor our agreement. I want this definitive now.
Well, I do too.
And I'm going to try to figure out how to get it to you. I want to know that we're capping it at 4.
From the recordings, investigators learned Pam had an arrangement with Ron, where she'd pay him $400,000 out of the life insurance money to kill her ex-husband, Gary Triano. But it seemed she was late on her payments.
And we have a disagreement.
I am very serious about this.
Well, I tell you, you're going to be very serious when you sit in a women's prison for murder. You're going to be really sad.
I'm going to be back at 4.
No, you're going to be in prison for murder.
That was chilling. When I heard that, that was absolutely chilling.
By keeping audio recordings, it implicates himself, but at the same time, it's a bargaining chip to ensure that if he were to ever go down, he was going to make sure that she went down with him.
That was, in fact, the smoking gun to show that the two of them had committed this murder.
This is incredible. I mean, this is just this side of a confession.
Based on all the evidence, detectives now believe Pam orchestrated Gary Triano's murder.
Pam Phillips stood to gain a lot by having Gary dead. $2 million.
Pam Phillips was coming down to her last few $1,000s. She didn't have any immediate prospects of marrying another millionaire, and she needed to do something. She had this life insurance policy there, and in Ron Young, she found someone that she could manipulate, and she was using him with this sexual relationship, so she was able to convince him, with the promise of payment, into killing her ex-husband.
In this case, is this some kind of an archetype of a black widow who is motivated to maintain relationships for their own monetary gain? I see perhaps Pam as somebody who felt entitled, both in terms of a particular lifestyle, not just finances, and so perhaps she felt that she was owed and deserved more, and went after what she thought was rightfully hers.
Prosecutors charge Pam Phillips and Ron Young with the murder of Gary Triano.
When we go to arrest Pam, we find out approximately a week prior to the warrants being issued, she had left the United States. She's gone. Working with different law enforcement agencies. Eventually, we find out Pam is in Lugano, Switzerland. We have details down to the apartment that she's staying at. We know what car she's driving, who she's dating, and where she has lunch most every day. We have that locked down. But we went to arrest Pam in Switzerland and she wasn't there. That was a huge disappointment. Eventually, through Interpol, she's ultimately found in a hotel in Austria.
We extradite her back to the United States. One of the things we had to do, because the European Union does not have the death penalty, we had to agree that we would not seek the death penalty in her case.
Back in the United States, Pam Phillips refuses to cooperate with law enforcement.
Pam never gave us a statement. I more expected that Ron Young would give us a statement implicating Pam, and he never said a word. Neither one of them would talk against the other. But we have all this evidence about what might have happened here.
Detectives are now able to reconstruct the final 24 hours of Gary Triano's life.
November 1st, 1996, Gary went to lunch with a friend. They had their lunch at 1 in the afternoon. Then Gary proceeded over to the La Paloma Country Club.
2:30 to 4:30, he's out golfing with a friend. During that period of time, when he went to the golf course that afternoon, Ron Young was stalking him. Ron Young had the bomb that would end his life. At 3:30, while Gary's on the golf course, Ron Young walks up to his car. He has the bag that conceals the bomb. Then Ron Young places it on the front passenger seat of Gary's car and walks away. At the end of golfing, around 5:30, Gary pays his bill and he walks out into the parking lot. Then at 5:38, Ron Young flips a switch on the remote control. The device detonates and the car explodes, killing Gary Triano.
The family put up with a lot from us. All our failings, they put up with those. And then finally, I was able to call Gary's oldest daughter. She was the family representative, and I got her on the phone, and I was able to tell her, we found the killers.
In October 2008, Ron Young and Pam Phillips are charged with conspiracy and first-degree murder. They're both sentenced to life in prison with no parole.
After Pam Phillips is convicted of killing Gary Triano, she stands up in court, looks at the audience, and in the front row were Gary Triano's family. She looks at them and she says, I did not do this. I did not kill Gary. I am not responsible. He is the father of my children. I did not do this.
But investigators are convinced they finally brought Gary Triano's killers to justice.
It was important to us to hold accountable the people that we had no doubt committed this murder. This was not a rage killing. This was not a spur-of-the-moment killing. This took lots and lots of planning. So when you think about the fact that Pam's carrying on with her life, she's raising her children, and at the same time, for months, she's planning that her ex-husband is going to die. That's what stands out to me.
All homicides are sad. But in this case, I knew the victim. And I knew the persons involved. And half the Triano family was devastated. I don't think there's ever closure. So while they may have closure, the persons responsible are now in prison. We'll never bring them again. It still doesn't bring Gary back.
It was just a real quick, out of the dark shot, and it was over.
He did not see it coming.
A shot from the dark.
It was absolutely terrible. There was half of his head missing. It's something that I don't think I'll ever forget.
A secret lurking around every corner.
This mystery woman shows up at the house recorded him having car trouble.
We see a text message that says, you didn't see me, and I didn't see you.
He said that he had no weapons, so why is he walking around with a shotgun shell in his pocket?
Her immediate response to me was, I want my lawyer. That tells me she's hiding something.
Yes, you have an alibi, but could they be trying to protect each other in some sort of bigger nefarious action?
The truth will be revealed.
The DNA matches is on the bus stock, on the trigger, and on the handle.
If there was one aha moment in the entire investigation, that's it.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Bluffton, South Carolina, a low country town brimming with southern charm.
Bluffton is a coastal town with a lot of emphasis on outdoor activities, water activities, and then, of course, fresh seafood.
Although there's only 20,000 or so who live in Bluffton, tons of people come in, and that's tourism. I mean, it's the hospitality industry is big.
It still has that small town feel where everybody seems to know everybody. We were actually just recently nominated as the safest city in the state of South Carolina.
But one autumn evening, Bluffton's reputation for safety is shattered.
The 911 call came in at 1:10 a.m. on October 28th, 2015.
911, major emergency.
My friend's been shot.
And it just happened?
Yes.
And is he bleeding?
He got shot in the head.
Where's your friend at now?
He's sitting outside. I ran inside.
Is the suspect still there?
I don't know. We were outside and someone shot her. We didn't see anybody.
And he's not breathing?
No, his brains blew out. He's dead.
Police rushed to the scene of the crime.
The victim was sitting on a couch still, like he's sitting up. He is slumped over to the side slightly, but his legs are crossed. If not for the obvious wound that he had on his head, you'd think he'd fallen asleep there, passed out or something.
There was a entrance wound on the left side of his head and an exit wound on the right side with half of his head missing. There was brain matter scattered across the wall.
The victim is 33-year-old restaurant owner, Jonathan Sherrill.
John appeared to be very well liked in the community. Very outgoing, very friendly.
Jonathan, by all accounts, was kind of the all-American good-looking guy. He's a businessman, pretty charming, the ladies liked him, he had a lot of charisma.
Tasked with investigating Jonathan's murder are Detective Baker Odom and Captain Joseph Babkowitz.
I was on the force for about 10 years when this happened, but it was only my second homicide, so it was fairly new to me. And it's something that I don't think I'll ever forget.
As detectives survey the crime scene, they aim to get a snapshot of just how the attack went down.
One thing that we noticed is the 2 shotgun shells that were on the ground. So we knew 2 shotgun shots were fired. One hit our victim, John Sherrill, in the head. The other one went off into the garage.
The absolute devastation caused by a shotgun could be the objective, because a pellet-based round works like shrapnel and covers a large area, meaning that if you weren't a crack shot, you could still probably cause some serious damage if you were just in the ballpark.
You've got a small tree line or some shrubs that really separate your backyard from the fairway, and that will provide the perfect cover and concealment for someone who wanted to spy, or in this case, murder somebody.
To find Jonathan Sherrill's killer, investigators will need to piece together the last 24 hours of his life.
He was holding on to a cell phone that he never dropped after he got shot, which we thought was unusual. The first thing that comes to my mind is that he did not see it coming.
It seems very clear at that point that it was just a real quick, out-of-the-dark shot, and then it was over.
The sniper-style attack perplexes detectives.
We're all kind of a little baffled by what's going on here. Is this a targeted thing? One of the first things that we're thinking is, well, we're going to have to figure out everything about John's background. Who might have had issues with him?
Detectives start building their timeline by speaking with the man who was with Jonathan when he was shot.
Right off the bat, we want to speak with Gene.
Gene tells them that on Tuesday, October 27th, Jonathan was hanging out with friends from about noon to 5 o'clock. Gene is working that day. He gets off work at 11:35 p.m. and he goes to Jonathan's and arrives around midnight that night.
So at 12:53 a.m., Jonathan on the back porch, he's shot and killed. His buddy Gene says, I'm out of here. He goes to run in the house. Gene reports that he looks kind of where the shot came from, or where he thought it came from. He didn't see anything. He didn't see anybody, but it was dark, and he was probably running for his life.
Gene immediately yelled for John's roommate, Rupert, told him that John had been shot, and he ran and called 911.
As it turns out, Jonathan's roommate Rupert was sleeping when the shooting occurred and didn't hear a thing. Detectives asked Gene if he was aware of anything unusual transpiring over the course of the night.
According to what Jonathan told Gene, around 10:53 p.m., a strange female just happens to pull into his driveway.
this mystery woman shows up at the house who reported, hey, I'm having car trouble. And so he went out to try to help her. This mystery woman tries to kiss Jonathan, which he finds very strange. And he told Jean he didn't know the woman.
Jonathan tells Jean that she tried getting into the house and he wouldn't let her into the house. And she eventually got back into the car, was able to start her car, and go on her way. There's no question in my mind that this could potentially be related to Jonathan being shot.
Detectives canvass the neighborhood, hoping to find information that will lead them to the mystery woman.
As it turns out, John's house is also very close to one of the exits of the neighborhood. And at that exit, and just like all the exits for this neighborhood, they have security cameras facing into the neighborhood and facing out of the neighborhood.
Police officers grab security footage, and they in fact find that there was a mystery woman who showed up at John's driveway, but the mystery gets deeper at that point because body language doesn't support the fact that Jonathan and this woman didn't know each other.
It is clear from the video that John knew this woman and that she was an acquaintance or possibly a friend of his.
So now you have Jean, who reports that Jonathan was freaked out by some mystery guest, but then you have video that clearly shows that the mystery guest wasn't a stranger at all. Who's lying? Did Jonathan lie to Jean for some reason? Or did Jean make that whole thing up for investigators? Was Jean involved?
Detectives are hunting for their first suspect in the sniper-style murder of Jonathan Sherall, a mystery woman with car trouble, who he appears to have received on his driveway.
At this point, what we know about this mystery woman is on the security camera. We've got a blonde Caucasian woman, slight build. You wouldn't be able to pick her out of a mugshot based off the security footage. It's nighttime and all that stuff, but you can still see enough to be able to get a pretty good idea of who this might be if you were to then see them later.
We know that this mystery woman arrives at Jonathan's house around 10:53 p.m. Later, around 11:43, she backs out of the driveway and leaves the house.
But then something curious catches Detective Babkowitz's eye.
As I'm watching the video, I watch it further to the time that the 911 call came in, and we see the same vehicle drive slowly past Jonathan's house at 12:43 a.m. The first thing on my mind is me and my team have to find out who this female is.
Investigators run a check on the vehicle and learn that it belongs to a local woman, Colette Collins.
Colette Collins. Not someone necessarily you would think would be a suspect. She's got no criminal history. She's a mom. She's got a pretty good job. Her husband runs a local business in Bluffton. So she doesn't really fit that profile who would be involved in such a gruesome murder.
But Colette's car is linked to the scene of the crime. Detectives summon her to the station for questioning.
My first impression of Colette is that she seemed very calm. If she was involved with this murder, she seemed very comfortable with it, and she was prepared to answer any questions we had.
The detectives ask how she knows Jonathan, why was she there, why was she driving by his house, and she says that she and her husband are friends with him. They had met at one of his bars and became friends, and she really describes them as very close friends.
She seems like she's trying to help the police with the investigation, and she is actually upset about the fact that something has happened to her friend.
Detectives question Colette about her whereabouts the night of the murder.
She tells us that she had been working at her job that night, which is a country club in the nearby area.
We know that Colette arrived at Jonathan's place around 10:53.
So, of course, the next question is, why are you at the house at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night? Why are you driving by? She says that her husband, Sam, struggles with addictions, with drugs and alcohol, so they have a dry house. But she likes to enjoy her wine or her alcohol every now and again. And so she describes that on this particular night, she had gone out, got herself a bottle of wine, and was riding around Bluffton drinking her wine, and just happened to drive down Jonathan Street.
Colette's story that she was out driving around, aimlessly burning fuel, guzzling white wine behind the wheel. I mean, it's just so bizarre that it has a certain ring of truth to it.
But what detectives aren't buying is Colette's story that she just happened to pop in on Jonathan.
So as they start aligning the facts, they see her drive by his house. They see the interaction where obviously they knew each other. She's out drinking. It's late at night. The automatic assumption, or at least interest, would be, there may be a little more to the relationship. But Colette denies any kind of romantic entanglement with Jonathan. She says, we're all just friends. In fact, my husband and he are best friends. I'm kind of the third wheel, if anything else.
Colette claims that after drinking and driving around in the car and dropping in on Jonathan, she simply went home, arriving around 1 o'clock in the morning.
Colette tells us that Sam is upset that she's been drinking, and they have some words about that, but it wasn't anything significant, and that pretty much is the end of her night at that point.
To confirm Colette's story, detectives reach out to her husband, Sam.
Sam's got this very, very pronounced limp. He's walking with a cane and initially seems very, very cooperative. Sam tells us that he got shot. It appears that it was a drug deal gone bad. He actually took a shot almost directly to his knee, and he's got a permanent limp for the rest of his life. It messed him up pretty good.
Sam pretty much verifies Colette's story that, yes, they're all friends. No, there's no affair going on. Yes, she rolled in drunk. He had been home all night watching TV. They got into a big fight, and then they went to bed.
Sam was home all evening, and if Colette arrived home at 1 a.m., that means she would have been driving at the time of the murder, with no opportunity to kill Jonathan. And seeing no motive for her to kill their close friend, detectives remove her as a suspect.
We didn't have any indication as to why this happened, really. It didn't have any indication as to who it might have been. It was just this, wide open, go in all these different directions, trying to find which thread do we go with as far as where the suspect is.
With no new leads to go on, detectives circle back to focus on what they do know.
So at this point in the timeline, you've got Gene, who claims he saw everything but wasn't involved. Then you've got this guy, Rupert, who apparently was asleep inside the home but didn't hear anything, didn't see anything. Could they be trying to protect each other in some sort of bigger nefarious action?
Sometimes the killer will put themselves at the scene to deflect their own guilt and involvement and put the suspicion or focus onto somebody else.
As they investigate possible motives for Gene and Rupert, detectives discover that Rupert had a reason to want revenge on Jonathan.
As it turns out, not only are Rupert and Jonathan roommates, but his family had invested pretty heavily in some of Jonathan's interests, and they lost their shirts in the deal. Losing a lot of money is not easy for people. That could make some enemies. So again, as you're looking at the kind of execution shooting it was, is this guy or his family involved?
Police bring Rupert in for questioning, and he admits there was bad blood between his family and Jonathan.
There were some allegations that money was missing and that John had potentially been taking money from the business. Losing money and theft could be a motive for murder.
Detectives put Rupert's and Gene's timelines to the test, hoping this will shed some light on whether they are telling the truth or spreading lies.
Rupert tells police that he got home around 3 p.m., that John and a friend of his were there. They had dinner around 7 p.m. He went to bed shortly thereafter.
Around midnight, he wakes up, walks outside because he hears John and Gene outside talking. Goes out there, smokes a cigarette and talks to them for a few minutes. He then goes back inside and lays back down, and he'd fallen asleep again.
Detectives compare Rupert's story with Gene's.
Police are able to confirm that Gene was at work until 11:35 and that he arrived at Jonathan's around 12. but that does not eliminate Rupert and Jean as suspects at this point.
With no way to eliminate Jean and Rupert through their timelines, detectives test the men's hands for gunshot residue.
We tested both their hands for gunshot residue to see if they had fired a gun recently, and both of them came back negative.
With Jean and Rupert cleared, detectives dig into Jonathan's personal life, looking for someone with a motive for murder.
Jonathan likes the attention of the ladies like to give him that attention. He's not that discerning whether or not the ladies have someone else in their lives, and word is around town that on more than one occasion that may have caused a bit of drama in his life when husbands and boyfriends who didn't care for the fact. Surely Jonathan had to know that playing with fire probably is not the best choice. If you're going to mess around with someone else's woman, you're going to get people irate at you, and jealousy is a big motivator. If your wife, your girlfriend stepping out on you, not only are you angry at her, but then you're also saying, that guy is the reason she left me. This guy is a guy we need to have a conversation with.
Detectives theorize that the murder of Jonathan Sherrill could be a crime of passion, and reorient their investigation to examine jealous husbands and boyfriends.
Jean told police that in particular there was one woman, Annie, who John was friends with, as well as Jean. Annie had come to John and told him that her boyfriend had beaten her up and that she was scared of him and that he was very jealous of her relationships with other people, especially John.
Annie agrees to come in for an interview. We talked to her, and she opens up about her boyfriend, Patton. If she really is going to John for comfort, and Patton found out about it, and he has this incredibly violent streak in him, Patton could potentially be our suspect.
When detectives investigate further, they learn that Patton has an airtight alibi for the night of the murder and wasn't in the area. With little to go on in Jonathan's personal life, detectives turn their investigation to his professional connections.
In 2015, John started a business with another restaurant owner.
He's a good-looking, successful businessman. But that's the surface. Underneath, the business is not so financially stable. There were a lot of people that Jonathan had lost money for, that had maybe some shady dealings with.
As a psychologist, I think it's common for people to have different facades. We may have our personal one or our work one, but sometimes where we get into trouble is when these facades don't tend to mesh well or they're in conflict. So in this case, it may be possible that Jonathan's image that he wants to project as a promising restaurateur and stand-up guy is now being threatened, which might lead him potentially into a decline in terms of his standing in the community. Jonathan may start to get desperate. He may look for solutions that he ordinarily wouldn't, and so this may have been the case. He got deeper and deeper into a cycle that he couldn't get himself out of.
Detectives investigate Jonathan's new business partnership with husband and wife, Shirley and Clive.
Shirley and Clive, business associates with John, had a rough falling out. That gave us some possible motive that could potentially lead to the killing of John.
With Shirley and Clive in their crosshairs, detectives call them into the station for questioning.
They tell the police about their business relationship with John. Shortly after they entered into this agreement, there were allegations of misappropriation of funds from Shirley and Clive about John.
Shirley's business had been around for a while, was very successful. They merged, and all of a sudden everything folds, and all this money's gone. And so Shirley has seen this business that was doing great. Now it's gone, and her life is ruined now.
John's desperate for money, and it's well known that desperate people are prepared to take risks that they otherwise wouldn't. And when you're prepared to take those risks, you can't necessarily control that outcome. The flip side to that is if you're responsible or have a hand in making somebody else desperate, like Shirley and her husband, that can come back full circle.
Shirley and Clive had a motive to kill Jonathan, but But did they have the opportunity? When detectives questioned Shirley and Clive about their whereabouts when Jonathan was murdered, they say they were at home from 9 o'clock p.m. until 7 o'clock a.m. when they went to work.
During the time of the murder, I was with her. She was with me. So it creates a very frustrating thing. Yes, you have an alibi, but it's not unheard of that a married couple would lie for each other. So it just creates another layer of, okay, they're alibied, but we can't rule them out.
Detectives ask Shirley and Clive if they own any guns. Under pressure, the couple makes a reluctant admission.
Turns out, they own a shotgun. Here's pieces falling in. Police say, hey, maybe we got him. They take the gun, they bring it to ballistics.
But when the results come back, detectives are surprised by what they learn.
The shotgun did not match the ballistics on the shells that were found at the crime scene. Because of that, we were able to eliminate both Shirley and Clive as suspects.
With their leads dried up, the investigation hits a wall.
Heat really is getting turned up on the investigators. They keep coming up with dead end after dead end, alibi suspect after alibi suspect. You've got a gruesome murder in a small town, a small tourist town. You know, there's answers that have to be found because it's starting to take a toll on a small community that doesn't deal with murders every single day.
Still believing the murder could be connected to Jonathan's business failings, detectives dig deeper into his finances.
He owes a lot of people a lot of money because he was begging from Peter to pay Paul, and so now the walls start closing in. If you're getting money from here and here to pay this guy, and you understand how debt works, all of a sudden, that whole game is going to end. That whole game is going to stop, and everyone at the same time is going to have their hands out. And that could create a serious issue for somebody who owes a lot of people a lot of money in a small town.
The deeper detectives dig, the more they learn that Jonathan's complicated money issues weren't restricted to his business dealings.
Jonathan was in great debt because he had some type of drug problem.
John was into the use of anti-anxiety medication and potentially some other drugs as well. The deeper he got into trying to be successful with the restaurant business, the deeper he got in with his issues with pills and drugs. And all of a sudden, he's got this habit. It's a serious problem.
I can't even begin to imagine what was going through Jonathan's life personally, late at night when the demons come, where he spends all day being this super charismatic ladies' man and having fun, and I'm sure he was, and spending other people's money. But he had to have been cognizant that stuff was coming down. Husbands are getting more aware, the boyfriends are getting more aware, the bills are coming due, his business is closed. He probably was feeling like his whole world, this whole big castle that he created, is slowly crumbling down upon him.
When investigators probe Jonathan's cell phone records for clues, they make a shocking discovery.
The last text that he gets is, shoot his ass, I don't give an F anymore. That number that he had been texting, we got a search warrant for that as well and determined that it belonged to Josh. Josh is, wouldn't necessarily call him a regular, but we see him more than we'd like to, with the police department. And he's been in and out of jail a few times, mainly small level narcotic stuff.
Josh is questioned by detectives at the local detention center.
Between 12 and 5, Jonathan and Josh were running errands. We know from 5 to 7, both Josh and Jonathan were at the house and they were playing video games. And then Josh leaves.
Josh's phone records confirm he was nowhere near Jonathan's house at the time of the murder. But he does offer up information that could lead to a new suspect.
Josh told us John was going from drug dealer to whoever who would supply him until he got so far into debt that he wasn't able to repay them.
Did he borrow the money from the wrong person who said, hey, it's time to pay up, and he didn't have the money to pay up? Could that be a motive? Could that have led up to his ultimate demise?
While investigating Jonathan Chiral's murder, police have uncovered a history of business debts, a pill addiction, and unpaid tabs with drug dealers. And now his friend Josh is providing more information about him.
The cops learn from Josh that he now owes all kinds of drug dealers, all kinds of bad guys money. So, desperate man requires desperate measures. He comes up with his grand plan.
Jonathan thought Seth was an easy target because Seth had a limp to him, and so he set up a robbery at his house.
He figures that if he takes Seth out, not only does he erase his debt with Seth, but he steals Seth's money and he pays off all the other dealers. Problem solved, no fuss, no muss.
I think plans that Jonathan may have had seem to us on the face of it as completely implausible. But when you're involved in a drug culture or subculture, that's inherently violent. Jonathan's young. He may not have fully understood the extent of the danger he may have been putting himself in, but also people evaluate that danger differently when they're under the influence of substances or they're desperate. It makes you consider options that maybe you ordinarily wouldn't have.
Detectives need to track down this Seth person as soon as possible, but they only have a first name to go on.
So cops then turn to Josh again and say, okay, who's Seth? Who is this guy that Jonathan felt that he could take out and solve all his problems? So finally, Josh says, I don't know who Seth is, but I know who he's married to. Colette Collins. Now, if Seth is married to Colette, that must mean, obviously, that Seth is code for Sam.
And that's absolutely a moment where we're like, okay, here, this is a big piece right here. We just got handed something that this is going to absolutely cement the direction we're going in, finding the guy that killed John.
Sam and Colette Collins, the couple who claim to have been close friends with Jonathan. Both have alibis. But knowing Jonathan had planned a robbery and attack on Seth, also known as Sam, detectives shift their focus back to the couple and pay a visit to their home.
There are several bullet holes in the house, both that appeared to be entering into the house and exiting into the house. So at some point, there was a shootout that occurred over at the house. When we get a little more detailed in questioning, Sam eventually does say something happened, and as I ask him more if he thought that John was involved, he says that John was over the house, was acting weird, and then John left. A short time later, these guys come up to Sam's house and try to rob him. So he did suspect John of setting the whole thing up. He said he wasn't mad at John for it, and that he just wanted to go after the people that robbed his house.
So police then ask Sam, all right, if you knew that Jonathan was in all this trouble, if you knew that he owed a bunch of drug dealers, why didn't you tell us last time we talked? And Sam said, hey, the guy's my best friend. I'm going to protect him.
But detectives aren't buying Sam's story.
At that point in time, I immediately think he's got the strongest motive out of all our suspects to kill John Cherone.
But our thought was, how is he making it 100 yards from the street down to the house, shooting a shotgun and getting away in time? Because he's got this limp.
And that puts Colette Collins right in investigative suspicion central. As this man is getting shot, Colette is driving by his house. I'm sorry, but it is not a galactic leap to put those two things together.
Detectives theorize that Colette could have been the shooter and Sam the mastermind, and haul them both down to the station for questioning. They start with Colette.
Colette doesn't tell the police about this home invasion that occurred just a month prior. In fact, when asked about the gunshots in the walls in the house, she tells police that they were there when they, in fact, moved into the house.
When detectives push Colette for information about Jonathan's murder, she clams up.
Her immediate response to me after speaking with her was, I want my lawyer. I want my attorney. That tells me she's hiding something.
With Colette stonewalling them, detectives lean on Sam.
We asked him if he'd be willing to give a DNA sample, and he very readily said, absolutely, I've got no problem with that. And he gives us a DNA sample.
But when police ask Sam about any guns in his home, his entire attitude changes.
Sam tells law enforcement that he does not have any guns in the home, and the police then ask Sam if they can search the home. And at that point, Sam asks for a lawyer and says no.
With Sam and Colette refusing to talk, detectives have little to go on to get a search warrant for their home.
Search warrants are among the most effective tools in securing evidence and can make or break cases. So when you don't get a search warrant, that sort of leaves investigators on their heels, and you have to sort of improvise. One of the best substitutes in lieu of a search warrant, and which can actually get you enough evidence to get the search warrant, is through good, dedicated surveillance.
Detectives regroup as the investigation into Jonathan's murder hits a roadblock.
This investigation is pressure on myself and my team. We are getting pressured by people from the town. They want this case solved. They want to know that there's not a killer running around town. And number one is pressure from the family. We want to give closure to that family as quickly as possible and catch a person responsible for their son's death.
But then detectives finally catch a break.
A patrolman initiated a traffic stop on a vehicle driven by Sam Collins.
Driver's license, registration, and insurance, please.
The officer ends up searching the vehicle because he smelled weed. He does find some drugs in the car, but in Sam's pocket is a shotgun shell.
I'm asking for my safety. Is there a shotgun in this vehicle? No.
Sam had already told us that he had no weapons. So why is he walking around with a shotgun shell in his pocket?
A 12-gauge shotgun shell. The same type of round that was used to kill Jonathan.
Walk back here? Yeah.
But that's not the only discovery the officer makes.
When Sam steps out of the car, no cane, he has a limp, but it's not nearly as pronounced as it was the day that he came in and talked to us. And so now we're thinking, well, he was putting on an act. And if he was putting on an act, why was he putting on an act? If there was one kind of aha moment in the entire investigation, that's it.
Sam is booked on drug possession charges and taken to the county jail. The shotgun shell in his pocket is enough for investigators to get their search warrant for the Collins home.
We find a metal safe, and the first thing that goes through our mind is the shotgun that was used in this crime scene is in that safe. We've got our case solved. We've got the murder weapon. It's inside this safe. We asked Colette to open the safe, and she says she doesn't remember the code. We call a locksmith out. It takes him about an hour to open up the safe, and when he opens it up, it's empty. We do not have a murder weapon.
Detectives get a search warrant for Sam and Colette's phone records.
So we've got 12:53 a.m. John is shot and killed on his back porch. Then at 2:24 a.m., we've got this text message from a phone used by Sam Collins to a unknown individual telling him that he's returned his shotgun.
And then we go on and we see a second text message that says, "You didn't see me and I didn't see you."
Detectives are closing in on Sam and Colette Collins as the prime suspects in Jonathan Chiral's murder and focus on tying them to the scene of the crime through text messages Sam sent about a gun.
This does a couple of things. It puts Sam with a shotgun, guy's killed with a shotgun, but the bigger thing it does is it destroys his entire alibi. Because remember, he had said, I was at home, my wife came home drunk, we fought, we went to sleep. I don't know what happened to this guy. Well, here by his own cell phone record, he's out dropping a shotgun off at a buddy's house. Who was this person? Where is this shotgun? And we need it, is what's going through police's mind at this point.
Detectives trace the unknown number to a friend of Sam's by the name of William and go to ask him some questions.
William tells them about his relationship with Sam and Colette Collins. He had known Sam for a number of years through the construction business. Sam had asked William to borrow a gun. He told William that he was concerned for his safety. He thought somebody was maybe trying to harm him or his family. William did not think anything about it, so he let Sam borrow a shotgun. About a month or a few weeks prior to the murder of John Chiral,
William says, you're welcome to take it. I haven't shot it since he came back, I just put it away.
We got excited, but we didn't get too excited. We submit the gun to the laboratory. And the ballistics came back and matched to the shells found at the crime scene.
This is the moment for law enforcement where it all comes together.
We then submitted for DNA, and the laboratory said the DNA matches Sam Collins. It's on the bus stock, on the trigger, and on the handle. We all just screamed. We were excited.
Based on the physical evidence that's there and the timeline from the video footage and the security cameras, we can put Colette right in front of Jonathan's house at the time of the murder.
Detectives now have solid proof that Sam had the means and the opportunity to kill Jonathan. But what about the motive?
John was interested in obtaining drugs, and he knew that Sam had anxiety medication and different pills, and he was in debt to Sam for about $1,200, and that's why he was murdered.
Detectives are now able to piece together the final 24 hours of Jonathan's life.
Around 10:53 that evening, Colette shows up and talks to John, hangs out with John till about 11:45. Gene shows up at about midnight. Once Gene's there, him and John are hanging out, having a good time.
Also around midnight, Colette came home intoxicated. Sam asked her where she had been, and she told him she had been at John's house. Sam was angry. He thought that John had taken money from him, that John was trying to kill him, and that John had something going on with his wife. And at that point, he grabbed his gun and told his wife to drive him to John Sherrall's house.
Colette didn't know that he was going to kill Jonathan. He told her that he was going to scare Jonathan.
You see them drive through the neighborhood past John's around 12:43. 12:53, Sam gets out of the car to go through the woods, to walk up and shoot John.
At 12:54, this is when Colette picks up Sam Collins.
And he tells Colette, hey, I just shot Jonathan. Now, this little piece of information now implicates Colette as an accessory after the fact. She's just, innocent, never done anything wrong, but yet she helped cover up a murder.
Colette and Sam are both charged with the murder of Jonathan Sherrall. But based on her husband's confession, Colette's conviction is reduced to accessory after the fact, and she receives the maximum sentence of 15 years. On October 18th, 2017, Sam Collins is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison.
I guess the biggest thing for me and what made me want to convict the two of these people was their lies and manipulation really got under my skin. And it's unfortunate that it resulted in the death of Jonathan Sherrall, who could have had a productive, successful life.
Timelines are always important in a murder investigation, period. You've got to put people and players and suspects in place. In this case, there was a lot more for cops to go on than just the word and the timeline verbally of suspects and witnesses. There was a digital timeline that cops were able to, once they had the information, put together. Video cameras, text messages, all those played into the timeline that narrowed in, honed in, destroyed the alibi of the two suspects, and ultimately cleared this case.
The thing with John is that all of his friends loved him. They were all very broken up about John's death. I mean, John made an impact on people, and he got addicted to these anti-anxiety medication, and it spiraled out of control. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person.
I've been in investigations for 8 years, and it was by far the best feeling in the world to solve this case. I've dealt with some really bad cases, but for some reason this one touched home the most because it happened in the community I live in, it happens in the community I serve, and it doesn't happen that often. And there was tremendous pressure on my entire staff, and every single one of my investigators rose up to the occasion, And we're able to give a grieving family some closure. And that was the greatest reward we could have had.